In the world of high-stakes data protection, security is paramount, and there's no more secure system than one that's air-gapped. But what does air-gapped mean? And are we changing the definition of the way the word is used? In this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast, virtual networks are air-gapped. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where each episode we bring together a group of experts from across the enterprise IT space to discuss a single topic or a premise related to enterprise IT. The Tech Field Day podcast is often recorded in association with one of our Tech Field Day events. This week we're at Networking Field Day. Tech Field Day is a part of the Future Room Group, and we are excited to be bringing you some of the brightest folks in the IT industry. I'd like to take a moment for our panelists to introduce themselves before we jump into today's episode.
Hi, I'm Carol Warner-Reese. I've been in networking for 30-some years and happy to be here.
I'm Jason Ginner, been in networking for about 20-some years and also very happy to be here.
John Osmond, consultant from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Most of the work I'm doing right now is working to the state office of broadband, and I've been doing this type of stuff for nigh of 30 years or so.
My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I'm a practice lead for Tech Field Day here at the Future Room Group. Let's jump into the premise for today's episode. It's an iconic movie scene, an aging movie star dangling from a rig attached to the ceiling, trying to hack into an unhackable computer with lights and sensors everywhere. The Black Vault at Langley is the most air-gapped system we have ever seen on a movie or TV set. But today, I'll just put it in a different VLAN and nobody will be able to get to it, right? This episode, we're going to unpack whether or not we are going to unpack whether or not virtual networks are air-gapped networks. And the reason why we brought that up is because during this event here at Networking Field Day, we had a number of companies who told us that their solution was air-gapped, which created some problematic questions from the delegates, because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, it's completely isolated, right? Like, I have to walk over with a floppy disk in order to upload information, and there's an armed guard with poison curare darts that will shoot me if I don't have the right passphrase of the day and that I don't match my photo. And everyone's like, no, we're just sending the traffic down a different wire. Like, that's air-gapped, right? So I'm gonna open this up to my panelists here, because I'm sure that they have a strong opinion about this. Why can't a network be air-gapped as long as the traffic channels are just separated?
I think the term itself, air-gapped, implies there's air in between. You know, it's a physically separate environment, not just virtually separate.
You've been buying those vacuum-sealed Cat5 cables? Because there's air in those things.
Very true. I just feel as though the term implies a degree of security where there's a physical isolation from the other things that could result in exposure from breach. So I think a virtual environment doesn't really. I don't think it meets that criteria.
Well, I'm not sure. There are some instances where you can use virtual networks and have air gaps. So if the routing process doesn't know how to get to a subnet, if you can't get to the network from, say, the enterprise has a storage network that they don't want anyone to reach, and if you can't get there from anywhere in the network, then it is air-gapped, even if it's on the same infrastructure.
I just think go back to the days of EtherCap and things like that. You can confuse this equipment to actually let it drop things from each of these virtual contracts into another one. So I don't think we can actually say that an air gap is an air gap unless it physically has air in it.
I mean, my good friend John Pross, who was my Novell mage, was able to hide an entire Novell server on a network by changing Ethernet frame types. 4 workstations on the network could talk to that server. Yes, it was plugged into the network, but we considered that air-gapped because literally no one could talk to it if you weren't on one of those workstations. And it was because a principal was absolutely paranoid that one of the students was going to hack into the database to change their grades, because I guess he watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So would you consider something like that, where we do protocol trickery to hide things, as being sufficiently air-gapped? Or do we actually need to unplug the machine and run it across the room to isolate it?
I think there's so many other terms for virtualization of network. We've got VRFs. I mean, you mentioned VLANs. I think that there's already terms for that level of separation, and again, I feel like air gap implies a physical separation, a secure environment, a physically secure environment for.
Then why do we keep using the term? Because I feel like isolated or secured or those words are way better to describe what we're offering. Why are we so hung up on air gapped?
So when I was talking about the air gap storage network, it's truly a isolated storage gap. I use the term wrong. And I think it's because a lot of terms sometimes are sexy or current, or we want to say. Right. And so when a vendor gets up and says, we are air gapped, and then shows connections to the clouds and connections into the internet and connections from here and there and here and back to them, it's like, yeah, no, that's not air gap. And so there's a kind of a definition, and like in a car, there's a firewall, there's a space between the engine and the compartment where people sit. And that's an air gap. And we expect the sort of same thing in a network. And so a real air gap is a separation. You can't get between the two. It's sort of a DMZ.
All of these separations, we're networking. We've been doing these things for years and years. It's all tunneling of some type. I don't care if it's a different frame encapsulation on a Novell network. 2 secure shell sessions from one person's laptop to the same router. Do you call that air gapped connections? Because I've got 2 connections that they don't run on top of each other. I think that, when you want to look at it that way, I'll change my mind. That's air gapped. You've got the ability to keep things away from each other. We've got separate channels. There's no way for things to bleed through them.
So a lot of it too is level of risk you're willing to accept. So what's my definition of air gap depends on who my customer is or who's trying to get an air gap. So what do you need an air gap? When you say you want an air gap, and they might come and say, I want an air gap, says, do you want this? Do you want no way ever anyone could get between things, even me when I'm built your network? So if you want it so that the person who designed your network can't get to some other piece on your network without walking to another room, that's a true air gap. But if you want to say, well, you're an exception. It's okay if this, under these circumstances, that can happen. So you have to really sort of define, what do you want? What level of air gap do you mean? Is it close? Is it like a centimeter, a millimeter, a yard?
What about the folks that are, the always theoretical, and I don't think it's theoretical anymore, the attack where you actually use air as the medium and you actually use sound to transmit things? At that point, even an air gap isn't sufficient for these types of things. It's how do you build these channels, and what modalities are there for them to actually move information from one place to another, and how, is it tunneled there? Is it tunneled here? Where is the wrapping mechanism to get the data from one point to another? And what is it? What physical medium? What protocol medium? Things of those nature.
Well, I guess the question then comes up, if we're building these ridiculously ultra secure networks, who needs them? Like that's the thing. If you give me enough money and enough resources, I can make a network so secure nobody will ever be able to get into it.
You might as well turn it off.
And that's usually what we end up saying is the only way this computer can be more secure is if you only power it on to do certain things with it. But then that comes back to, well, how useful is that system? And what kind of data are you storing on there that can never be observed by another human being who isn't like hooked into the Borg hive mind? We know that the ultimate answer is going to be someone in the Department of Defense who has secrets that are so secret that if I even knew they existed, let alone what they were, my brain would explode into 1,000 pieces, right? I don't know that outside of maybe 3 things, there's any data that is that secure.
Well, it's not secure, but it's valuable. And so if I come up with a next AI algorithm that's going to, someone's example this week, create a ton of fertilizer for a penny, and then just sort of change the world, change the market thinks, that information is totally very important to someone.
Right.
And so that information I might want to protect because I have a vested interest in it. I built it. I can monetize it. I can make a lot of money, or I want to change the world and feed people, hungry people everywhere. And there will be actors that don't want that getting out. So it's sort of how valuable is the information? It's not necessarily just security information that has to be separated and isolated. It's just intrinsically valuable information. Mainly,
it comes to value, whether it's intelligence or if it has monetary value. And then the piece that I start thinking about on this is, what are the mechanisms you use to keep these things apart? Is it is encryption is there a way to do air gapping? Can you actually say this thing is encrypted from this point to that point? So we've effectively got an air gap that no one can get into this for a given amount of time.
So what about quantum encryption, which we were talking about earlier this week? Can we use quantum encryption where if someone tries to listen and it changes the data so they know it's an alarm and it's there? I mean, like, do we need that?
Well, but I think you guys are kind of you're moving past an obvious problem here. John, you bring up a good point. Yes, this system needs to be air gapped so nobody ever can touch it. You enabled file vault, right? You've enabled login challenges. You've disabled all of the USB ports. My good friend Edward Haletke just pours super glue into the USB ports on his systems so that nobody can ever access them. You've made it so that there's sound deadening equipment so nobody can analyze your keystrokes to figure out your password. The monitors all have those polarizing grills so that you can only see them when you're dead on, right? I've just named off a whole bunch of things that will infinitely raise the security of your network without having to isolate that machine. But what's the first thing that everybody wants to go to? Oh, this has to be air gapped. Think about the number of laptops that are currently running a program that if they're out of contact from a main control server for more than a week, they automatically wipe. To me, that's just as secure as having an air gap system. Because if I'm not checking in regularly, data's gone. But yet we get back to Tom Cruise dangling from the ceiling, trying to hack the knock list out of a Packard Bell 486.
You just said hack. How has the word hacker changed throughout the years from somebody that was clever and doing something neat to something that's kind of nefarious? So is air gap going to change so that it's not talking about a physical air gap between things, or is it some construct that we build that stops the immediate passing of data?
And the irony is that the original hacker, Captain Crunch, whistled DTMF tones in through the air into a phone receiver to hack long distance. So not even a phone receiver is safe from hacking. But you're right. What we have gone from is people who are investigating technology to understand how it works and make it work better to individuals who want to be famous and deface things to now like highly commercialized nation-state backed criminal gangs that are they're rifling through executive emails, trying to uncover new product releases. They're getting into Business Newswire, PR Newswire databases the day before something happens so they can make money off the stock so that they can turn it into Bitcoin so that they can then back a nation-state government that's isolated from the world by sanctions and things like that. That's a long way from a whistle and a box of cereal. So in a world where we think that as long as we unplug the machine from the network, we're safe, is it even possible that that's not enough anymore?
You still have to worry about EMF. And you might have to be in a enclosed space.
A SCIF, a secure compartmentalized information center, where basically it's shock isolated and surrounded on all sides by deadening equipment, and like you can't bring your phone in there. Although we've seen pictures of members of Congress who just love to bring their phones into SCIFs, and the intelligence people who roll their eyes because you're not supposed to do that. And that was actually one of the things that I was thinking about was when you look at a lot of the way that information has been disseminated from supposedly secret systems as of late, you're right. This paper is colored fuchsia and has stripes all over it that says "Do not copy." And then I reach into my pocket and I grab the greatest, little Minox camera that ever existed, and and then I can upload it to my iCloud account. So we've already found ways to get past that. I mean, look at someone like Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning, who basically plugged their iPod into their computer at work and was able to download files because it turns out iPods can store PDFs just as well as they store MP3s. And they were able to sneak a lot of information out there. And that system, for all we know, could have been air gapped. So are we overblowing this? Are we holding companies to a standard that is unrealistic by saying you can't call it air gapped unless there's air in the middle? When what we're really saying is you should change the terminology to refer to it as an isolated system or change it to a compartmentalized system.
Yeah, I think it's become an overused and maybe nebulous term.
Kind of like military grade encryption.
Right. Yeah, like that.
Military intelligence.
Or cloud, just nebulous could mean a bunch of different things to different people. And, I feel like in the modern context, the marketing teams have probably latched onto it to imply a certain degree of security. But it doesn't really, I don't really think it fits the original context it was meant to have.
Yeah, so maybe it's sort of we need to hold the vendors or the people who say my system is air gapped a little more accountable and say, I accept when you say my system is isolated, my system can be secured, my system is this. But when you say air gap and I look up the dictionary, what does air gap mean? I expect isolation. And physical isolation and no possible. And you can't just say, well, it's air gap because the only people who can get to it are on your own site.
I would agree with you. Will you look up the word literally in the dictionary and tell me what it means?
No, because if I get up again, I'll break my mic.
Well, the thing is literally now, it literally means its own antonym because we have redefined what the word literally means. It means something that actually happened, but also something that figuratively happened. I mean, let's be fair. The name of this podcast used to be something that in the entire tech industry said, oh, when I'm talking about something happening in a physical location, it's on premise. No, it's not. It's on premises. However, we have redefined terminology over the years, right? So why can't we just roll with that? What's the harm in letting them say that it's air gapped? When we all really know that it's not really air gapped, but we really can't change what they're wanting to say.
Maybe folks should just be wary of the term and really get more information about what that means to that. When they hear air gapped, find out what precisely does that mean. Because again, I think that the term is a little too nebulous to assume anything.
Or when you hear the term, a vendor says, my technology is air gapped, you just look at them in the face and say, you know how you tell when a vendor is lying? They move their lips. And when you say the word air gap in your lips, you're lying.
But at the same time, we're practitioners, right? Our job is to make all of the sales lies come true. No kidding. That's actually what one of my sales guys told me in my old career. How can we increase the security level of these systems that they say are air gapped to make them more air gapped like? How can we as networking and security professionals? I mean, I remember stories of snort sensors that had their transmit wires clipped so that they couldn't accidentally reveal their location to people that were trying to evade the IDS. I mean, it's a little extreme. I don't need to carry wire cutters, but like, what can we do to help make this a better place so that maybe it's not air gapped, but it's ultra secure?
That's going to come down to, do you want to do it at a physical layer? You just talked about clipping wires. I mean, conceivably, you could, if you knew where people were going, you could at a packet level route everything to a dead end in a black hole someplace so that only the traffic you want going to the right place. You can do the same thing at any level in the stack. And when, as I keep telling everybody, every single one we're doing is a tunnel of some type. It's an ASCII tunnel from, your keyboard into that router if you're secure shelled in. At some point in that tunneling point, you can circumvent the traffic you don't want to be moving to black hole or die or go someplace where it's being assimilated and watched in any of those pieces, so that you can keep track of it. And air gaps, is an air gap going to be something you want to look at the data, or do you just want to throw it away so that it can't be used at all? Because there's a lot of information that, the stuff you would normally throw away, knowing it exists is a very good, might be pertinent to you as well. So maybe air gapping isn't the right thing you want to do. Maybe it's, I want to corral the data I don't want so that I have it as an intelligence source.
And it might be just a discussion point. So if my customer comes to me and says, I got this technology because it can be air gapped, make it so. And I'll talk to them and say, okay, what do you mean by air gapped? How isolated do you want it? How much effort do you want to separate your information? How hard do you want it to be to upgrade your devices when new patches come in? How hard do you want it to be for anyone in the universe to reach it, anyone in your organization to reach it, anyone in a department to reach it? And it sort of will open discussions. So let's have some more discussions about what you want to say. So if the vendor might have told you it's air gap, yeah, it's possible I can make it air gap, but you will never use it. I could make it this, I could make it that. How will I make it so it works for whoever bought it?
So it's become a more general term that implies a high degree of security, but you should really dig into.
A potential for a high degree of security. Yeah. Although it could be air gapped, it doesn't have to be, and it might never be air gapped. And then when they say, oh, well, I bought it because it was cool, but I don't really want that. Well, all right, let's figure out this mess stuff you got, how we can build what you need.
As Tom pointed out, words change. We still dial our phones. How many people have had a dial on their phone for?
Well, I mean, think about password complexity requirements, right? Every CEO on the planet wants the highest degree of password complexity so that I can't get hacked until they have to change their password every 30 days. And it has to be 15 characters long with 4 special characters, no repeated characters, and no repeats of your password for the last 7 years. And then they immediately go turn it off.
Or network access control.
Yeah. I can't see the server anymore. Turn it off because I want to be able to see this, but you don't need to see that. ZTNA says you're not authorized to. Doesn't matter. I'm the boss. And that's usually where we start getting into those compromising situations, right? Is I've created a policy and everybody has to follow that policy except for me because I'm different and special. I can totally run as root on my own box. I know I'm not supposed to, but I know what I'm doing. How bad can it be? And we all know what happens at the end of that, because that, just like every other story, the reason why those things exist, the reason why those policies are in place is to prevent careless mistakes from becoming massive disasters. And, something as simple as accidentally publishing the wrong API key in a GitHub repo. And now all of a sudden you have a $12,000 AWS bill next month. Well, what if that API key was, I don't know, the IP address of a satellite imaging system that was flying over a terrorist camp in Africa? Now, the DoD knows how to prevent that from happening. But does, the contractor that just is getting paid $12 an hour to work on this stuff? I don't have a good answer for that. Words mean things, according to one of our great delegates, Justin Warren, and he's absolutely right. When we use a specific term to refer to some kind of a policy construct or physical security, we have to be sure that what we're doing is accurately describing the situation as it is. And look, you've been listening to the on-premise IT roundtable for years, so I will be the first person to argue with that. But sometimes we actually have to take a step back and ask what we're doing. And as I've said to a number of people, if you use a better term, an isolated network, a virtually isolated network, you're going to get the point across. But unfortunately, that's talking to tech people who are very critical of poor word choices. A lot of people who buy technology want to hear something cool, military grade, advanced, AI, quantum, you name it. Whether or not it actually is inconsequential. If it has the right buzzword, people are going to buy it. And so the next time someone comes into your office and starts talking about air gapping something, my recommendation is to hook them up to a harness and dangle them into your server room. And if they can actually manage to hack into your servers, you probably need to have something that's air gapped. You should also call Tom Cruise because he's probably going to find a new stunt person. That will just about do it for this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Before we go, if people want to find out more information about where you guys create content and share your things, where can they go? Carol?
LinkedIn for me.
Okay.
LinkedIn and Blue Sky.
LinkedIn will work fine for me.
And we'll have links to their LinkedIn profiles and Blue Sky information and everything down in the show notes. We want to thank you all for tuning in. Remember that you can always find the latest episode of this podcast if you go to techfieldday.com/podcast. And remember that Tech Field Day is your home for all things related to enterprise IT. Tech Field Day is a part of the Futurum Group, and we publish our episodes on techfieldday.com as well as on our sister site, TechStrongs TV. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure that you're sticking to the premise.